baseball, and this.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
This is the goal. While the pot's not bad, I think we can do better. Like most woodworkers out there, I'm always looking for something to build with scrap wood, and with the cost of hardwood these days, I keep even the smallest offcuts around. And so in this video, I'm going to attempt to build a hanging flower pot with some leftover scrap wood. For the initial design, I knew I wanted some kind of stripe pattern with those contrasting woods, so I took the last sliver of Paduke I had lying around and ripped down a handful of strips just to get an idea of how it would look. 4 looks pretty good. 5's a lot. 5's too much. Let's not go crazy. A little overkill, but I'll go with the big boys. One more. The lighter wood here is maple, and I didn't know exactly where I was going with this, but I knew I liked the pattern, so without doing any kind of measurement or anything, I just did an initial glue up just to see where it would go. I figured if this didn't work out for the pot, I could at least use it as a miniature charcuterie board or something like that. Well, as it turns out, I've been doing some math, and this is not going to be enough wood to make the entire circumference around the plant. My initial thought was to just make a 4-sided box and put the plant in there, but obviously I don't have enough wood. Then my next thought was I'll make it a hexagon, so I might get rid of some of the empty space. I was cutting out some test pieces, and the hexagon also isn't going to be enough wood. And my next thought was, well, this bottom circle is a lot smaller than this top circle. So if I can make a hexagram that would cover the circumference of the base, and then I can tilt the pieces out. Whatever the gaps that are created, when I tilt the pieces out, I would fill with some other kind of wood. I got that leftover walnut or something. That's the new plan. Things don't always go to plan, but you always have to have a backup plan. Alright. This flower pot was actually going to be for a friend of mine, and I don't typically build small craft projects like this, so I was kind of out of my element. I'm usually building storage or built-ins or things like that, so this project definitely took some brain power to come up with some kind of design that looked unique. All the steps I just went through there was milling the board after the glue up. So I first flattened one face with a jointer, and then flattened the other face relative to that first flattened face with a planer, and then I ripped the final width down on the table saw, and then finally cut the final length of the 6 boards on the miter saw. Yes, you are correct. It's a ton of crap just for a little 20 by 5 inch board, but it's important to get everything flat and square, especially for a precise project like this. I cut the wedges that would go to fill the gaps between the tilted boards out of a small bit of walnut I had lying around, and I landed on 15 degrees after playing around with some test pieces. The wider the angle, the more the boards tilted and created a bigger final circumference. I didn't bevel the edges on these since that would have created too sharp of an angle, I think. Look, I don't really know exactly how all these angles work. There we go. All I know is that it seemed to fit pretty close on the test pieces, so that's what I'm going with. Don't stick to me. Stop sticking to me, please. Oh my god. Dude, what do you... There we go. Please. To glue up this part, I'm just using plain old painter's tape. Mainly because I didn't even know how I could use hardware for this kind of shape, but also I've found tape to be a really fast and easy way to clamp smaller pieces like this together. I just made sure to carefully align the edges of each piece face up and hope that the angles would all come together okay. Alright, a little bit of salt for the boys. I happen to be a salt freak, and I mean, I salt every bite individually, and if a restaurant doesn't have a salt shaker, I'm going on a crusade to close that place down. But in addition to being required for dinner, salt actually helps to add some grittiness to these joints, that way they don't slide around as much when you're pulling the boards together. All things considered, with this weird, awkward 12-sided shape, I was pleasantly surprised with how this went. There we go. Actually, it looks pretty dang good from the outside. Yeah, just slightly off on the inside, but never gonna see it in here anyway, so whatever. Yeah, it seemed like I was off like 1 to 2 degrees on most of the joints on the inside, but if I was going to miss, I'm glad it was there, because if the gap was on the outward facing side, it would have been a lot uglier to cover up. I think I like all of them except for one. Like literally just one joint came a little bit jank. I know the inside won't really be seen here, but I did some minimal cleanup just to get any large gobs removed with the chisel. Another thing I didn't think about is the original design was going to have the boards straight up, so I'd get the full height of these boards. But now that I had to widen it, I also lost some height there, so I need to add on to the height to cover the top of that original pot. I think I have a little bit more walnut to make that lip. I think the brown will look cool on the top, so we're getting there. This lip was made in much the same way as the first bowl part. I just added a 30-degree bevel to the bottom part so it could sit vertically on top of those angled boards already glued up. While that was drying, I got to work on the bottom, which really proved to be kind of tricky because of the angle of those boards. So I want this to sit flush in this opening. So I need to cut all of these edges in at the same angle, which I think is like 30 degrees or something, I don't know. Getting these angled vertical cuts can be kind of difficult on a table saw, just with how close the blade is to the fence, and just keeping the workpiece tight and your hands away from the blade. So to make these cuts, I'm using a sliding fence jig where I can just clamp the workpiece right to this and push the jig through instead of moving the workpiece through, and this really makes the cuts a breeze. Pretty freaking close. Decent sized gap right there. I think I can make it work though. Another one that looks not so great is this one. And that's very fixable. Well, other than that, man, not bad. See these little lips right here? Does that look good? I kind of like the alternating colors more than this solid color. I may remake this part. Yeah, new plan. I'll keep the alternating. This is my last board of walnut, which I need to make thicker. And I cut it in half and glue it together vertically like this. And I still have plenty of maple left over because that's the cheap stuff. I found it to be a really important part of my building process to be flexible in my design. Oftentimes when something is partly built, I can see more clearly how it's going to come together, and then I may decide to make a change from there. Even when I fully mock something together ahead of time, I still end up making small changes during the build, whether out of necessity or preference. Sometimes it creates a lot more work, but I definitely would rather put more effort into it if it's going to make the project better. And we go again. I think this is the 5th glue up of this project up to this point, and that takes the total individual pieces tally up above 40. But at least they're small and easy to work with. One thing that's obvious now is I have to get rid of this angled lip on the top here to be able to attach any vertical boards. There's just way too much inconsistency here. The previous ring that I made didn't line up that closely. I'm going to attempt to use this jig, which is basically an extended fence, and just hold it up against this and run it across the table saw. Should work. After getting the top flat, something I should have done a lot earlier, I finally glued in the bottom piece that I cut out earlier. I don't know why, but I was really happy with how this particular piece came out. 15 bones ought to do it. Alright, I've taken a personal moment, but now I'm back thinking normally. And I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't line up, but I'm going to just glue it together anyway. And there'll be these overhanging lips, and I think I'm just going to sand those lips off. It's not going to quite be perfect, so I think I'm going to sand the whole thing and basically get it like round. It's going to be the best I'm going to do. I can't make a third one and fail again. I have to cut my losses at a certain point. I'm going to try and incorporate this one as well. I'm probably going to get rid of this little like jagged lip in the same way that I got rid of the lip on this one. Not ideal. I would have loved to have nailed these angles, but will have to be for next time. I think I'm going to have base bowl, then this one, and that one. I think that looks pretty good. Let's start with this one. After the glue up of that first bowl, I made some casual comment like, weird, those inside angles are very slightly off. Oh well. Well, turns out that slight imprecision made it impossible to match later, and I can't say exactly how it happened, but again, this is one of those design changes that comes out of necessity, which does happen sometimes and doesn't always lead to a worse product, and I think in this case, I still like the way it's coming out. Oh yeah. Yeah, see there's massive lips here. I mean, that's like 1/4 inch. It's gonna be a fair bit of sanding for sure. After that last glue up, I could confidently say that this thing was completely built. So all I needed to do was make it pretty, and this process basically involves adding in wood filler for any small cracks and seams, and of course, lots and lots of sanding. I used 80 grit to remove those big lips, and then 120 to 180, and finally 220 for the last grit. Once sanded and branded, I cleaned this whole thing off with mineral spirits just to get all the dust removed. I added 1 coat of finish, and I'm going to be using Rubio Monocoat oil, which will really help to protect the wood and add warmth and some sheen to the color. It probably comes across at times that these projects are frustrating, and they are, but that's the fun part. I mean, if this were easy, I would have lost interest a long time ago, and this project definitely was a lot of fun. Hopefully you got some tips and or entertainment from this video, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And all that was left with this one is just to deliver it to its final recipient. Thanks for watching. Here you go.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
It's like a... yeah.